It looks like we have pretty much everybody, so I'm going to get started. Thanks for sharing in the chat. We've got people from all over at this one. All right, so my name is Lynn Calamia, and I'm the executive director at Roebling Museum. You guys probably all know me by now. And this talk tonight is part of our new series where there's going to be three different categories of program. This is our first expert roundtable, I believe, actually, right, Sarah?
Yes.
So you may have been to our Curator's Corner version where we talk about new artifacts that we get at the museum. Then there's new research, which was just the Black History program we did. And then this is our first expert roundtable. The next presentation, mark your calendars right now. What date is it actually?
It is April 28th.
That one is going to be about toilets and sewers in Roebling, not just in general. So you're going to want to tune in. We may have collected a new artifact as part of our restoration of the Roebling row house, and we really want to talk to you guys about toilets. It's actually a question we get asked about a lot on our walking tours. So it sounds like we're making a joke, but it is actually going to be really, really good. And before you guys ask, yes, all of these presentations are recorded and we post them on our YouTube page. So if you go to YouTube and look up Roebling Museum, you'll see it goes back. You can even see the Roebling road trip ones that are more engineering based, and they're all on there for your enjoyment forever. So the way that we're going to run the program tonight is Pierre, who's our special guest. He's going to give us an amazing presentation. And while he's talking, you're going to submit any questions and comments in the chat or the Q&A so that we can, Sarah and I will be managing all of those and getting them ready so that we can do a really good Q&A at the end. So while looking in the chat, I saw some familiar names. So I know some of you guys have been to the museum already, but just like to do a quick overview of Roebling Museum since we're not there. We're on Zoom tonight. But this picture here, you can see the museum is up at the top corner, and the Delaware River is sort of just outside of the frame here. But this is our historic mill yard. And the point of this slide is basically that we're four museums in one. We have the company town, which you're going to see a lot of today because we're talking about bricks, and a lot of that stuff was made out of brick. The historic mill yard is right in front of you here. The museum itself is that has about 7 galleries of exhibits that you can come and visit. And we have all kinds of different materials on display for you to check out. And the one thing that we are also excited about is on every Saturday, we do the company town walking tours. Those have been a big hit, and we walk through the town. You learn about who lived in the houses. We show you census data, old postcards, worker records, and it's really a lot of fun. And the other thing, the number 4 on our experience list over there was the Roebling Row House, which is new. It's actually the background of this slide, so that's why I'm leaving this on for a second. We purchased the house at 101 Second Avenue, so that's directly across from the museum, and we are turning it into a different kind of museum that you can come visit. And the Roebling Row House, we are set for that to open in 2028. So also mark your calendars for that. You will hear a lot more about Rolling Row House in the coming weeks, months, years. And there's so much going on behind the scenes. Actually, the toilet stuff we were just talking about comes out of our research for the Rolling Row House project. And the one thing I really just sort of want to mention tonight is that if you see at the bottom here, the New Jersey Historic Trust gave us a huge grant, huge for us, really big, that will cover the beginning. Like, so if we're calling it phase 1 of restoring the house. So this is going to be, we were calling it a stabilization grant, but it's really the basic stuff we need to take care of. So repointing bricks, which is another reason why we're talking about this today, is because we had to learn a lot about bricks in order to even start preparing for this phase of the work. We need to repoint 60% of the masonry on the house. to keep the water out, which is, something we're all striving for. We also, if any of you are on our social media, you might have seen that we were doing archaeology. Archaeology started at the site. So this grant is paying for an archaeological survey. We should probably do a presentation on that soon to the findings of what came out of the ground. This grant's also paying for construction documents, and I think the thing everyone's most excited about is restoring the porch. So you can see the bottom is what the porch looks like today, but the top is what we're going to go back to. So the way the porch looked like when it was a company townhouse. So it's really super exciting. Everybody's real busy and excited to be busy. But the thing is with this grant, we need to raise $50,000 match so that we can complete these projects. So you'll be seeing, I think we have an email going out next month with some more details about the work we're doing and the amount that we need to fundraise. And it's been really great. Some people have already started sending in checks. Thank you, if any of you are on this call, because I can tell so many people are excited for us to get into this. But that's enough about Rolling Row House because today we are here to talk about bricks with Pierre. So, Pierre, can you maybe I'll stop share and you start share?
And also unmute.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Very well. Okay. My name is Pierre Lacombe. I was a geologist for 37 years with the U.S. Geological Survey and another 10 years prior to that. And so the talk I'm going to be is about the bricks of Roebling, and I'm supposed to talk about the leaves of Roebling, but I walked around Roebling yesterday and there were no leaves on any of the trees, so I don't have to talk about that. That's a joke. I will talk about at the end of this presentation. Okay, there's brick buildings in Roebling. Almost all of the buildings are brick. But how many bricks are there? What types of bricks are there? When were the buildings constructed? Washington Roebling and his impact on the bricks of Roebling. The basic geology of New Jersey and the Roebling area. There's a clay report from 1904, and you know this facility was built in 1905. And so that report talks about the bricks, and it was funded by Washington Roebling. And the 4 local brickyards and clay quarries that were in the Roebling area that were used. So we're going to be covering all of those in the next 35 minutes. As you can see, in Roebling, the row homes, 2-family homes, single-family homes, and the stores are all made out of brick. The churches, the walls, the outbuildings, the bank, gas stations, walkways, stables, factory buildings are all made out of brick. The workers' home are on the left-hand side of this picture, and the factory is on the top of this picture, and the railroad tracks are coming down the center, or the right-hand side. So as a result, this whole community is made from bricks. How many bricks did they use? 1 million? 3, 10, 30, 100 million? Well, these are the homes right here. And so these, can you see my pointer on the right-hand side? You see all the row homes. The Roebling Museum is on the right-hand side. Then there's a series of row homes on 2nd and 3rd Street. And then duplex homes, 2-family homes. More row homes on the left-hand side of this. Row homes on the other side of what was then called Knickerbocker Way. Today it's called Hornberger Street. This is the grocery store in the center of the picture, and the wealthy people's homes were near the river at the top side of it. So there's approximately for the row homes, the single-family homes, they needed 30,000 bricks, 33,000 bricks for building. There's about 100 buildings of a similar style, so they needed 3.3 million bricks. On the row homes, they needed 5.7 million bricks. So a scientifically wild guess is 9 million bricks just for building those. South of Knickerbocker, there was a bunch of homes, and they needed 2.6 million bricks there. And then over on the other side of the railroad tracks, they needed 2.9 million. So they needed about 14.5 million bricks just for building the homes. But for building the factories, they needed a 20 million bricks. So in total, they needed about 35 million bricks. That's a lot of bricks in the year 1905. So what type of bricks were used? Were they machine made or handmade? Were they face bricks or common bricks? Were they plain bricks or glazed bricks? So if you go into Bordentown or into Burlington, you'll see a lot of bricks with this sinusoidal shape in them. And that sinusoidal shape is what is a handmade brick. They would throw mud into a mold shape of a brick, punch it down, do another load of mud, and cut it off with some type of a skiv to thing it off. But Roebling's bricks all have these linear features on them. They were extruded from a machine. And so you can always tell a machine-made brick because you always see these parallel lines where a little teeny pebble would get caught inside of the mold. And so as a result, you can tell the difference between a handmade brick and a mold-made brick. How are the bricks laid? Wall engineering, wall patterns, ornamental patterns. So typically, these are all 2 bricks thick walls in all the houses. Well, if you have one row of here and one row of there, and they're not knitted together with these cross bricks, the wall is rather weak, and this can fall away or this can fall away. So that you would put these cross bricks every once in a while to keep a 2 brick wall sturdy. So the typical simple wall that's 4, 6, 8 feet high, all you see is the end of the brick because it's not going to fall apart. Most of the homes in Roebling are what's called English bond. You can see the butt end of bricks and the long end of bricks. And there's many different styles of this English bond. Flemish bond is a really ornamental, and you see the face of the brick, the butt end, the face, the butt end, the face, the butt end. So it's alternating constantly. So this is a strong wall, and it's not very expensive to make. This is a stronger wall, but it's more expensive. And this is the strongest wall, and it's the most expensive. And so they do that on the bank and the mill supervisor's home, but most of the homes are built this side, and the chimneys, low walls, and things are built with a stretcher bond style of brick pattern. And so you can see this stretcher bond here, just a wall of bricks. You can see this, I call it a 1-1 pattern. 1 row of butt ends, one row of sides, 1 row of butt, 1 row of sides, 1 row of butt, 1 row of sides. Whereas this English bond, there's 1 row of butts, and then there's 7 rows of side rows and 1 row of butts, 7 rows of sides. There's also a 1-5 and a 1-6 pattern in the buildings in Roebling. The Flemish bond, there's only 2 buildings built this way, side, butt, side, butt, side, butt, and alternating. It's very, very ornamental, and it's very pretty thing. So these are the different patterns, and if you walk around town, you'll be able to see these. You spend the time counting them, you'll figure out a little bit more. There's also the ornamentation around the windows. Some have just a simple plain brick. Some are wedged in there with these little trapezoids. Some have arches. Some have full circles. Some have just a board, or not a board, that's a cement block. And some go ornamental. So they put ornamentation on top of the bricks just to add a little flair to these buildings in Roebling. And then obviously the chimneys, they have ornamentation on them. And if you look at the chimneys, this chimney is an original chimney. A lot of the buildings have a very simple brick up. They don't have these step outs here. And that just is indication of an original chimney as opposed to a rebuilt chimney. And then there's this dentition that's on the front of some of the buildings for ornamental flair to the buildings. So it's always nice to see how the masons were able to work with the bricks to give you some visual beauty. The date markers on the buildings, you don't have to be very smart. If you see the word number 1905, that kind of tells you when it was born. Then there's information signs put up in the past that talk about this being built in 1905. This building was built in 1906 and 1915. So there's a suite of years that they were using to build these various buildings. Washington Roebling, he had a good knowledge of mineral, and he was a major influence on the geologic community and local geology. Here's Washington as an old man. Here is in the military as a young man. He was a major mineral collector. He had the largest, most extensive private collection in the world. And he donated his collection many times for research, for display. He donated workspace, and he donated much of his money for the study of minerals. He donated to the Smithsonian, to Rutgers, to the St. Louis World's Fair. He donated to universities like Yale, Rutgers, Cornell, Harvard, and RPI. And he donated to government like the U.S. Geological Survey and the New Jersey Geological Survey. He was a board member of the New Jersey Geological Survey, the American Mineralogical Society, and the British Mineralogical Society. He had scores of mineral reports. Credit to him because he had such an extensive mineral collection. The New Jersey Geological Survey notes him in multiple reports between 1898 and 1918. And there's one mineral called Roebling, and it's an eponymous mineral. It's named after Washington Roebling. He collected minerals from his days in RPI in the mid-50s to his death in 1926. It's interesting that this year, 2026, is the 100th anniversary of his passing. So here's an annual report from 1904, and they note Washington Roebling is in here, and his term will expire in 1908. And here's a book by Reese, The Clays and Clay Industry, and it was published in 1904. And in that book, Kummel was the state geologist in 1904. They wanted to study the bricks of the state of New Jersey, but they did not have an appropriate workroom to do that. And so Washington Roebling donated a building. This condition was, however, greatly relieved by the generosity of Colonel Washington Roebling, who put at the disposal of the New Jersey Geological Survey a two-story brick building not far from the State House. It is thus impossible to fit up a chemical and physical lab and the necessary office space. So he was the impetus in 1904 to finding the best bricks in the state of New Jersey. I think it's more than coincidental that in 1905 he built Roebling next to one of the best brick manufacturing facilities. This is a basic geologic map of New Jersey. You can see this orange zone down here in southern New Jersey, this green-blue zone in central New Jersey, this pink-purple zone in northern New Jersey, and this brown zone in the middle. And these are called Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic. If you think about the word zoic, just think of zoo, animals. So if you had a paleo diet, that's an old diet. So this just means old animals. Mesopotamia, middle. These are middle animals. And Ceno means new. new animals. So Paleozoic are fish, clams, crabs, that type of thing. Mesozoic are dinosaurs, and Cenozoic are mammals, hair-bearing animals. So these are just time units. This is one time. This line right here is when all the dinosaurs. This is just kind of a basic background in the geology. Roebling is located where the star is, and we'll do some close-up geology in the. So this is the close-up. Roebling is where the star is in the lower left-hand corner. Bordentown, Trenton, the Falls of Trenton are located where the prong of Trenton is. And you can see these brown sediments versus these green sediments. So the dinosaurs all died at this time. Just kind of giving you some background. If you get up close, everything has a name. And in geology, the oldest units of the coastal plain are the Raritan and Potomac Formation, the Magathie, Merchantville, Woodbury, Englishtown. These are just names given to units. And just to give you a background, I show a picture of a bee here, and I'll talk about that in a moment. The village of Roebling, for those of you who don't know, is located right here. In this cross section, this red cross section shows the sediments as they are. So at depth, there's metamorphic rocks of gneiss and schist. On top of that is the Raritan, Potomac, then the Magathie, Merchantville, Woodbury, Englishtown, and then land surface with the Delaware River flowing here. In the Magathie Formation, they found a bee I'll talk about. In the Woodbury, they found a nice dinosaur down in Haddonfield. So it just kind of gives you a sense of where they were getting their material for the bricks. Bricks are not quite as interesting as dinosaurs. And so this is the Hadrosaurus, giant lizard. And it was found in 1858. It was found in the sediments are 80 million years old. And this bumblebee was found in Kincora. And this is the oldest fossilized bee until about 10 years ago when they found an older one in, I think it was in Sweden or Norway. But this is it wrapped in amber. And they drew what the bee looked like when it was living. So this is the oldest recorded bee. Obviously, this tells you something about flowering plants growing, because it would have caused the reproduction of aided in the reproduction of plants. And this is found on Muriel Dobin's brickyard in Kincora. So this is Muriel Dobin's brickyard. And these are the other brickyards that existed near the Roebling steel mill. So I'm going to talk about the Bordentown Brick Company, Sylvester Graham Brick Company, Muriel Dobbins Brick Company, and Joseph Martin Brick Company. There's also some clay mines that were quarried. There's many, many more clay mines than there are brick companies, but these made millions and millions of bricks for the Roebling community. That's where they came from. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how you make bricks, bringing them from clay and sand to an actual brick. So you have to dig up the clay, allow the clay to age, and it has to be 1 to 6 months. You mix the clay with sand and water for proper consistency. You place it in a brick making machine. You extrude it into relatively long rods of clay. You cut it to brick length. You allow it to dry for a couple of days. You make piles of this, 40,000 bricks per tile, cover it with mud, then get a wood fire, a charcoal fire underneath it, burn it for about 7 days, allow it to cool, separate the good bricks from the bad bricks, and sell the good bricks. That's what's done. And so this is an example of how they dug the clay in 1904. Men would take a shovel and shovel it, put it right on top of these carts, and the horses would carry it away. Horse can only carry about 1 ton in this muddy material down here. So they would a lot of times use rail cars And these rail cars, you could put many tons on there and move it out there. Therefore, you weren't constantly just having one man. You could have 100 men working on this. This is an example. This is in Roebling, actually. This is behind um, on Hornberger Street between 130 and the railroad tracks. If you walk back in the woods on the west side of it, you'll see remnants of this. And this is, they use the sand and the clay, loading it into these carts. If you've ever been to the Quick Check store, which is about 4 miles upstream from Roebling, it's closer to Fieldsboro. This is where the Quick Check store was, and this is Crystal Lake is on the right hand side of this. Route 130 is on the right hand side, and the Delaware River's on the left. And so these are aging and drying sheds and all the buildings. So the Quick Check was the actual site of the brick making factory. This was another brick making factory, which is in the village of Crosswicks, and they really made more ornamental bricks rather than just plain bricks. The first thing you had to do was kind of mix the bricks up, mud mixing. And so this horse would go around, there's a pivot in the center, and it would beat this material all up. And this was a rather common way of beating, and they would make this wheel go back and forth, so you'd beat up the outside and the inside. You just didn't go on one thing, and the horse would just walk in circles all day long. They also had pug mills, which were thousands of sharp knives to cut up this clay, much like this wheel is cutting up and breaking down all those clods of clay. This is a newspaper article in which there was a pug mill, and it has many, many knives in it. And the knives in the pug mill would cut up the clay, and a man who worked there was stood too close to shovel the raw chunks of clay in it, and he fell into this. And while working, he lost his balance and fell into the deadly grinding wheel. A few minutes later, a fellow workman happened to pass the hopper and saw the man's body being ground to pieces. I provide this for the people in the audience that are macabre and enjoy this type of stuff, and there's a few of you out there. Okay, brick making, prepare the mud extruded from the machine and slicing it. So you push all this mud into the hopper, and then it gets shoved out by a steam engine, and you can see this rod of formed brick. And then there's a machine that cuts it off into individual bricks. And so that is one of these machines for making bricks. This is another example of that machine. It extrudes the brick. And if a pebble gets caught in here, it'll make a streak the whole length of this row, and you'll be able to see that, or on the top, the whole length of this row. So this is another cutting machine. And here's some men, and this is done in Crosswicks, and they're cutting more ornamental bricks. But you can see the piano wire right here, and he just lops it down, cuts these two bricks. They'll squeeze out some more bricks. He'll cut them off, and that's all he's doing all day long. This is how they dried the bricks, because when they first come out, you put your finger on them, and your thumbprint will show right into them. So these guys have to lay them out in the sun. And so if you go in some of the buildings in Roebling, you'll see thumbprints right on top of the bricks. And it's because they were touched by these men as they were laying them out to be sun-dried for a short period of time, 1 to 3 days. And here's another guy making bricks, putting them out, and this is where he was making them by hand as opposed to by machine. Then they'd have to stack the bricks up, and they put them on end, on edge, allowing air to flow through them. And these men would throw the bricks up to that guy, he would throw them to them, he would throw them to them, and they just stack them up, making a pile of 40,000 50,000 bricks. Then prior to building them, they had these little furnaces underneath. They'd build it, they'd shove wood into there, and they'd heat these bricks up. They'd cover the bricks with mud, and then they'd heat them up. They heat them up for 5, 6, 7 days, allow them to cool down, and then break them apart. And if some of the bricks that are close to the heat cooked very, very well, these bricks up here didn't get as much heat, so they cooked less and less. So these are examples of bricks that cooked a great deal, and this is an example of a brick that didn't cook much. You always think of bricks being red. Well, that's just because they were really black muds and black clays, and when you heat them up, you drive off the carbon, you introduce oxygen, so what little iron is in there, the iron and oxygen mix together, giving it that typical red color. Otherwise, the bricks would be black. And then you'll see some of the bricks, if you break them open, they'll have a black interior with a red rind around the outside. So the Bordentown Brick Company, Sylvester Graham, Muriel Dobbins, and Joseph Martin Brickyards. So this is where the Quick Check store is. Here's Crystal Lake, and if you've ever been to Crystal Lake and you take the tours, you walk down and there's a little bridge right here, and there's this isthmus going across. This isthmus used to be a railroad track to come up into here, and they quarried all this. This is the housing tract that's across from the Quick Trek. This road goes into, this is the railroad, this trek road goes into Bordentown, and this road goes into Bordentown. And so this was all clay mines, and clay mines over here, and they made millions of bricks here. This is an example of it in 1930, an air photograph showing the quarry, the location of the kilns. And then as you go up here, Church Brick Company, there's more clay quarries up here that you see on the side of the road. And so this is just a bunch of information. I'm not going to read it all, but they had different size engines. They made 8 million bricks a year. They invested. They had 40 men working. Each man earned $1.50 a day. They sold the bricks for $9, $10 per thousand. If they were nice red bricks, if they were salmon colored bricks, the price increased by $7 to $8 per thousand. This is a typical cart that they used to move the bricks around. And you'd pour the clay in here, and then it could tip it over very easily without moving it off the railroad tracks. And while I was exploring around Church Brick Company, I came across these carts laying in the woods. Took a little shovel to clear them off. But this is the remnants of the brick mines, brick quarries that were up there. The next quarry I'm going to talk is the Muriel Dobbins quarries, the kilns. This is the village of Kincora. These are housing in Kincora. This is in the 1930s. And the clay quarry. And if you walk, and if you've ever taken the Roebling Trail along the Delaware River, you cross over the stream that empties Knickerbocker Lake, walk along the railroad tracks, cross over the railroad tracks, and then you go underneath the tunnel under 130. If you walk back in this place, you're going to find thousands of partial bricks laying on the ground. They would use that for fill. Bad bricks they'd use for fill and whatnot. This is where the Kincora honeybee was located, someplace in here. Muriel Dobbins, again, he had a bunch of acres of land. Where he was getting it from, mining issues, the years that he was in operation. And he could put these bricks on boats, and he could put them on the trains. And so it was very, very convenient with there's a wharf right here, and the Camden and Amboy Railroad is right here. So it could easily export these to Philadelphia to make a lot of the brick companies, but they only had to move them from here to here to build the plant. This is a photograph of Muriel Dobbins. It's an obituary. He was quite an impressive man, brickmaker. He was the president of the Camden Pottery Company. He was the city treasurer. He was a master builders exchange. He was the father of the Philadelphia Trade School, and he was the president of the board of the Eastern State Penitentiary. And he's described as being an unassuming but forceful man. This is the train station in Kinkora. It's located about, and when you read about Washington Roebling and his brothers coming, because the Roebling steel mill was called the Kinkora Works for many years, named after the train station in Kinkora. So this is what he would have got off before he took a carriage into the village, the farm fields, which today is the village of Roebling. And this is Hornberger Avenue right here. There's the railroad tracks and Route 130. And if there's a little grocery store right here, and this is Knickerbocker Pond, and this is the former trolley line. So I showed you a picture of men mining with a trolley behind it. So they were mining in this area. But this whole area, if you look at the land, it's very, very hummocky. There's a lot of artificial hills in there. And that's where they were getting the clay. They would mine the clay there and make the bricks. I'm not sure exactly where on this property. For those of you who know a little bit about the village of Roebling, there's a Boy Scout camp over in this area. And that Boy Scout camp used to be another mine that would feed clay to this facility. In the Joseph Martin brickyard, again, he made red bricks and talks about the geology in detail. I'd put half of you to sleep if I were to go on to this. It's interesting to me, but I know this. So this guy, Joseph Martin, in the year 1902, 3 years before, placed this ad to sell his brickworks to somebody, anybody, and it was 3 years before Roebling was built. Well, it became quite a money-making operation, selling thousands, if not millions, of bricks to Roebling. If you've been to, this is the bend in the road, Delaware Avenue, in the village of Florence. This farm field right here is today the elementary school in Florence, and this is the former football field in Florence. You can see the riverfront school and the former football field. This was a massive clay mine, and they would dig it out of this cliff face right here. And so this is just a mine. It is not it's not a brick making factory. It is just a mine for making, for getting the clay. And if you go into the city hall in Florence Village, you'll see this mural on the wall. And this mural is about 15, 18 feet long. It was painted by Peter Beeling. And if you look very closely at this red area on it, now you got to remember this is a 20-foot long by 5 or 6 foot high, beautiful painting. If you look at this red area, this is it. And this is the clay mine. And they were mining this clay, bringing it out, dumping it into a sailing vessel, and they would bring it down to some factory down in Philadelphia to make pottery, to make bricks, to make whatever they wanted to make. So this is the penultimate of Florence beauty, in my opinion. And you can see the Roebling steel mill right here upstream from it. He's taken a little bit of license with it, and the R.D. Wood steel mill down here, also made out of bricks. So now we're going to talk. So that's pretty much the end of my brick talk. Now we're going to talk about the trees of Roebling. So what I did was I drove all the streets of Roebling, and I plotted all of the sycamore trees. The yellow circles here are all sycamore trees. There's about 300 sycamores in Roebling and on Amboy Avenue. And then on 3rd, 4th, and 5th Street, there's other trees. There's maples, oaks, cherries, flowering pears, locusts, pines, and spruce trees. There's not a lot of pines and spruce trees. But these are all planted by Florence Township. The sycamores were planted by Roebling. And I thought, when I first thought this, I thought Roebling may have, but all of these are small diameter trunks. These are massive diameter trunks on these Roebling trees. This is the only place where they're small diameter trunks. So the typical tree is the sycamore. This is not from Florence because they're just too much in the background. But the characteristics are the bark, which is always very mottled, the fruit, which is brown spheres that dangle on the tree, and it's a very big. I measured one tree, it's 12.5 feet in circumference. That's a massive tree. Roeblings planted these trees because they tolerated smog-filled air in the 1930s. As it turned out, in the 1700s, they were building arboretums in England, and they were taking trees from all over the earth and bringing them to England to build these arboretums. And they brought North American sycamores. They also brought Chinese plains tree, which is a relative of the sycamore. And what happened was the two started to interbreed. In the city of London, in the 1700s, they were using lots of coal from northern England, and the London plane trees, the interbreed of the Chinese plane tree and the North American sycamore, tolerated very easily the smog-filled air of London, and it was one of the few trees that survived. So the sycamore trees that are in Roebling are not there just because they're ornamental or whatever. They're there because they provide plenty of shade in the summertime, but no shade in the wintertime when you want to have the sun beat on your house. And they survive the smog-filled air of the 1910, 20, 30s, and 40s, when Roebling was a very, very industrial community. So the difference between the London plains tree and the sycamore is the sycamore only has a single ball hanging it, whereas the London plane trees has mostly double balls hanging from it. There's also subtle differences in the color of the bark when the bark falls off. The other trees of Roebling, maples, oaks, cherries, flowering pears, others, Florence planted them because when you only have one tree and a pest or an insect or a fungus or something hits it, it hits all of them. So most communities try to plant 5 or 7 different types of trees so that if the oaks get killed, the maples, cherries, and flowering pears last. If the pears get killed, the maples, oaks, and cherries last. And you can walk around this town and you can, it's tough for me, I'll talk about that in a minute, but to tell all the trees, you can do it, but it takes a little while. Most of these are ornamental trees. They're not what you're going to find in the forests of Burlington County. So if you're going to try to identify these trees, many of the city streets have exotic ornamental trees. Trees are divided into 2 major groups. Trees with cones and needles, which are conifer trees, and there's about 10 types of conifers in Roebling, and broadleaf trees. The broadleaf trees are broken into 2 groups, those with opposite twigs and alternate twigs. And the term mad horse means that it's maple, ash, dogwood, or horse chestnut. Those are the only opposite leaf native trees in the New Jersey area. Alternate leaves are all many other type of alternate twigs. To study trees, you really have to study them in all seasons to learn these features. You got to study the bark, the twigs, the leaves, the fruit, the soil, the wood, the smell of the wood, the flowers, the sound of the wood, the pitch, the taste. You got to do it in spring, in summer, the fall, and the winter. So this is an example of a London Plains tree, an example of a very scraggly spruce. You can tell a lot of times the oaks because they leave their leaves on all winter. And the cherries, they're rather beautiful right now in Roebling Park, and you'd be crazy not to go out and look at them today and tomorrow. They're absolutely beautiful. In the spring, it's easiest to study the flowers on the trees. This is a red maple flower. This is a cherry blossom. And this is a magnolia flower. In the summer, it's best to study the leaves. In the fall, it's best to study the seeds. And in the winter, it's best to study the bark. So you have to kind of study these things over the course of 2 or 3 years. I have done that up in the Adirondacks in the Champlain Valley, and I've done it to somewhat during my career as a geologist here in New Jersey, but not to the level that I can identify urban trees planted by a city, which is a lot of times are exotics. I thought this tree was interesting. You got a straight trunk, and then you have this shoulder and a bigger trunk. And why is the tree shaped like that? Well, this is one type of tree, and this is a root. So they grafted this tree to this root system because the roots tolerate the soil better, and the tree is a better looking tree. So this is an example of a grafted tree in, there's the park and the Delaware River. I just thought it was kind of an interesting thing to show you. So my summary is Roebling, they used 35 million bricks. Most bricks were manufactured along the Delaware River. The clay and sand for the brick was quarried locally. The bricks cost about 9 cents per thousand. I didn't mention this, but in 2000 they were less than a penny per brick. In 2026 it costs about 50 to 70 cents per brick. Washington Roebling was instrumental in the New Jersey Clay and Brick Report. Many former quarries can still be visited. You got to walk through the woods, but the Crystal Lake Trail and the Kincora Tunnel area. Brick debris is strewed all over the ground, and the London Plains trees tolerated sooty air in the steel mill. So, that's the end of my talk. I hope I didn't go too long. If you want to ask any questions, please ask Lynn, and she'll feed them to me. If you want to send me directly, I'd be more than happy to.
Thanks so much, Pierre. That was great. We have two questions to start off.
Okay.
So, the first question was about the bank. Tom Pearson asked, why was the bank a different brick color than the rest of the buildings that you showed us?
Um, the bank wants to use more regal looking bricks. So they would have chosen more deeper colors to their bricks. They would have used a pattern that was more ornate, and it was also built much later than the other buildings in downtown. If you go to the baseball field located on 8th Avenue, there's a house down there. That house used to be where the bank is. They put that house up on a carriage, moved it down there. I'm not sure what year it was, but after moving that house down to the baseball field, where the carnival always is in Roebling, they then built the brick, and that was probably built 5 or 10 years after the town was set up. So it was both, they used regal looking bricks, and it was a much later time period.
Great. Thanks for answering that question. And then the next question we have is from Laura. She asked because you showed us the different bricks that weren't cooked all the way versus the ones that were cooked. And she asked, are bricks that are not completely cooked as strong as the fully cooked ones? Did they use all of the bricks, and what were weaker bricks used for?
You never know if an apple has a worm in it until you take a bite. And if you see the worm, you know there's a worm in there. So a brick, you don't know if it is good or bad until you break it apart. So as the masons are using it, they'll hit every brick with a mallet, or every fifth brick, to find out if the brick is good or not good. And if it's no good, he'll throw it to the side. And if you look at the bricks that are left over, they check them out before they sell them, and then the mason checks them out before he lays them. So there's 3 or 4 levels of double checking on it. And if they're sturdy enough to take a couple of taps with a mason's hammer, they're good enough to be used. You will see some of them are broken, but that may be from differential settling of the building or something. But they are tested before they are put up, both by the company that makes them and by the mason who lays them.
Awesome. The next question we have is about the Kinkora bee. It's from Martha. She
Okay.
asked when it was discovered and how it was discovered. Was there a geological survey, or like how did they discover the bee?
Dumb luck. So when these men are digging this is all being dug by hand, and so they would come into a zone where there was amber, or they would come into a zone where there was lignite um, is a precursor to coal. When a tree dies and it falls down in a swamp, it gets buried. The all the minerals leave, and just the carbon is left over. So they would come across these lignite zones, and people like using amber for making jewelry. And the guys knew that if they could pocket that stuff, they could get big money for it. So they would pocket that because it would give them a little extra money. I was just reading about um, Washington Roebling when they were building the village of Kinkora. The workers who were doing the excavations came upon a bunch of Indian artifacts, and I'm sure that Washington Roebling paid them handsomely, 50 cents or something for the bushel basket of Indian artifacts. So he would have probably said to him, if you find anything that's interesting, I'll buy it from you. And he was very generous with his money to buy new minerals or new earth materials.
Mhm. And then our next question is about how did the brickyards locate the clay deposits to mine?
So when they built the Camden and Amboy Railroad in the 18, well, every community, there's 1,000 reasons why they would have done it. The American Indians mined that clay along the Delaware River to make their pottery. And so when you look at Abbott Farm up in Hamilton, they were mining the same material to make their pottery. And if you walk along the shore of Florence, or between Florence and Fieldsboro, you'll see where the high tide has washed out, and you can see the red clays. They're called variegated clays. There's red, there's white, there's yellow, there's green, there's black, blues, purples. And these clays, somebody is clever enough, because all you really need is enough clay to build your house. And so there was these cottage industries where I wanted to build a house in 17, 1800s. And so the White's Hill mansion was built out of those bricks. And realized these make good bricks. There's also many buildings in downtown Bordentown, downtown Burlington, made out of handmade bricks. And somebody earned a living doing that. And those guys would just finally say, okay, this seems to be very good. Let's look for more of it, and they would find more of it, and they'd start mining it. So it would go from a guy wanting to make enough bricks for himself to a guy who was good at it would make bricks for his neighbors to an industry that would make thousands and millions of bricks.
Great. And then we have another question from Elizabeth Yule. She asked, "My house in Trenton is brick. I think most are S&F. Was this a Trenton company?"
No, S&F stands for Sayre and Fisher, and that was up by Sayreville. But it was a major brick production. And getting bricks from Sayreville on the Camden and Amboy Railroad down into Trenton was very easy to do. And so S&F, they always put their initials on their bricks. And so that's very common to find that because a brick with no initials, if you look at the bricks in Roebling, very few of them. Only the only bricks that you'll find with any features, letters or something, are along the shoreline. It was usually the bricks that lined the inside of the kiln, and they say Trenton fire brick on them. Many of them do, and some of them have a star on them, which is an ornamental feature. You generally don't collect bricks that are not ornamental.
Awesome. So we're down to the last 2 minutes. We have a question about the mural in Florence Town Hall from Jean. So when you talked about the mural in Florence Town Hall, were they mining clay from the Delaware River cliff from tunnels? It looked like there was a tunnel into the cliff. Did they create framed tunnels into the cliff to mine the clay?
I know that up at White Hill Lake, was it White City Lake, which is by the Roebling Park in Trenton. They had tunnels. They had tunnels that went back 200 feet into the cliff, mining that clay. The only reason I know that is because I read that. I have never read where at the Ayers Pit in Florence that they climbed. The only place I saw that is on Bewling's painting. I've never read anything otherwise. So I think he took a little bit of liberties to paint that, but maybe he had some source of information that I'm unaware of.
And then we have one last question from Tom again. Um, Pierre, are you planning on studying other parts or other stories from the building of the town? Um, and he says he has some good stories from the drugstore at Fourth and Main.
What I'm working right now on the Camden and Amboy Railroad and the stone sleepers used by that. And if you go into Bordentown Light Rail Station, you'll see the work that we're doing with the not only the Bordentown Historical Society and the West Jersey chapter of the National Railway Society. I gave a talk a year ago now, half a year ago now, on eponymous minerals up at Sterling Mine. And it got me very interested in Washington Roebling's mineral collection. So I've been amassing information. He started collecting in 1857 when he was going to college at RPI. And at that time, Dana, who was the world's best mineralogist, had identified 800 minerals, 80 common minerals, and about 700 other minerals. By 1910, they had 2,500 minerals, and it was more than Washington Roebling could handle. Today, there's about 3,500. Still, there's only 80 common minerals. The rest are all exotics. And so I find it rather interesting that Washington Roebling, he didn't just have it wasn't just a hobby to him, it was an avocation. He really was interested in minerals. So that's what I'm working on next for the Roebling Museum.
But Tom, you could talk to me about those stories you have because it sounds really interesting. We have the blueprints to some of those buildings too, so maybe
Yeah.
we can connect about that.
Lynn is much more interested in that facet, and I'm a one-trick pony. I like the geology component of it. Lynn has many tricks. So
And Pierre will also be giving a talk about his research on Washington Roebling's mineral collection for our expert roundtable in June at the end of the month, last Tuesday of June. So if you're interested, you can find the link to that to register on our events page on our website or on our Facebook. But thank you so much, Pierre, for sharing everything that you know about the bricks in Roebling and the leaves. I live in Roebling, and so now I will be walking around studying these trees and the houses, so in a different way. So thank you. And again, next month, do not miss our toilet Zoom. It will be one to remember. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and we hope to see you again
We'll
soon.
send out an email shortly with the link to the post on YouTube. So if you missed it or you want to share it with someone, we'll make sure everybody who signed up for this gets that. All right, good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.